right. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for showing up, and we're going to get started. This is my second tips and tricks of the year, and we're just going to go through this pretty easy. So, right now, a little bit about me. For those of you that are new, I've got over 36 years of experience in AutoCAD across multiple industry segments. I'm currently one of the senior support specialists here at Imagine It. In other words, if you have a support plan with us and you call in for a problem, and most likely you're going to most likely if it's AutoCAD based, I will probably be the one taking it. I also do handle a lot of the other software. Don't ask me too much about Vault. It's not that I don't know Vault, it's just that's not my forte. Otherwise, I'm usually pretty good with most of the other products. I've taught AutoCAD as a certified instructor, and I still teach AutoCAD, Civil 3D, InfraWorks, Revit here out of the Boise office. I've had over 15 years in CAD management, over 8 years in cruise ship building, 5 years doing support for civil survey, landscape architecture before that, and I've worked in mechanical design, electromechanical, printed circuit boards and schematics, architectural and acoustic design, as well as doing equipment layout in industrial spaces. And I do have a bachelor's in business management and a master's in organizational management. So here's today's agenda, and while I go over the agenda, I'm going to launch a poll, and I just want to know just how many of you are actually new here today. So just go ahead and answer that poll, and we just want to find out just kind of how many of you this is your first time here. So you're going to find out that we do things a little differently with mine. And Cynthia, I just wanted to say thanks for the great shirt comment. I love it. And so we're going to cover a couple of things today. The first thing we're going to do is a SetByLayer command. We're going to cover that one and some of its nuances and why this one's really kind of cool. There's a purge command and a minus purge command and why both are important. Plus, I'm going to give you a little bit of insight on how purge actually works and give you some other information. I'm going to do a recap at the end of all the webinars that I've done for this year for 2022. And then at the end of that, we're going to have a live Q&A. So bring any question you've got. If I can answer it at this time, perfect. We'll go through, I'll answer it. We'll give you a demonstration. If I can't, normally what I do is I keep track of any of your comments that I don't have time to answer, and then they end up in a future webinar. And we'll talk more about that. So it looks like I'm going to go ahead and close the poll because I don't see any activity. And 38% of you are new. Excellent. That's a nice number. I hope you guys, Christy, can't see the screen. That I'm not sure why you can't see the screen because I am broadcasting. And Nick, well, you can get a shirt like mine on Amazon. That's where I got this one. So let's talk about the first one. We're going to talk about SetByLayer. So this changes the property overrides of selected objects to by layer. And you can specify which properties are changed to by layer, including color, line type, line weight, materials, and plot style. If it's a STB, you can also have it redefine block definitions to set the geometry contained to by layer as well. That's the important piece of this. And this command can be run via the command line where you type in SetByLayer, or can by expanding the modify panel in the ribbon, you have a button here that says SetByLayer. Robert, if you're not getting any audio, double check and make sure that your audio is not muted or that your volume's not set too low, but you should be getting audio. So when we run the command, it asks to select objects or change settings. If we select the settings option, we get this. So we can tell it exactly what properties we want to change to by layer. We can go color, line type, line weight, material, transparency. Plot style only shows up if you're running STB or style-based plotting, so then you can force the plot style to by layer. We can select objects. What I typically do in these cases is I'll type in the word all to select all the objects on the screen. And then we are prompted to choose, do you want to change anything that's by block to by layer? You can answer yes to that. And then finally, we're prompted to choose, do you want to do SetByLayer to include the blocks? And normally I pick yes here. Can font dim size be changed to SetByLayer? Should this be done as a viewport change? Font and text size is not set by layer. This is entirely for colors. So again, we're only talking color, line type, line weight, transparency, material, and plot style. We're not talking about sizes. That's different and depends on if you're using annotation versus non-annotation. And we can talk about more about that, Jacqueline, in a minute. So we're going to do a quick demonstration here. And of course I have, right? Hey, everyone should know what this is, right? It's a cruise ship plan because, you know, I did this for a long time. So we're just going to launch it, set by layer. And in my case, I'm going to select all. Now my settings are set to check everything. And what I can do here is when I hit enter, it's going to prompt me to change to by block to by layer. I'll say yes. And I'll include blocks yes. And what you'll see it do is it's going to go through and process everything. And this is a fairly heavy drawing. So, and now everything is set to by layer because if I check my layer properties, you're going to see everything was set to white, except for these two layers. And that's Italian in case you don't know. And you'll see that nothing in here comes up as yellow, which means those layers aren't actually being used, but now everything is set to by layer. This is the fast and dirty way of doing it. And I do have a second example. So what I see a lot of people do is they'll just grab everything, and once this highlights, right, come over here and we go set by layer, and then this is going to force everything back to color by layer, and this is where we see that we have some block definitions in here. Once this is done, right, so these are block definitions, and these did not get updated, and you'll see that it's a block reference, and it's an unnamed block. So what you'd normally have to do without using this command is you'd either, if it's a named block, you'd have to go in and change the block definition. If you've got a list routine, like I have a couple of list routines that I can go through and force everything to color by layer, or the set by layer here is what works out really well. So again, we come back to home, modify, I can do set by layer here. And I think I was selected on an object actually. So we're gonna go modify, set by layer, and I'm gonna select all again. And again, I will say yes and yes. And then those will suddenly become by layer. This is a great function, and it's one of those that people don't know about, right? This is what these tips and tricks are all about, is things that people don't know about or things that people don't normally use. And this is a great way, especially if you get drawings that come from outside your own organization where somebody has drawn stuff. Like you'll see right now, my layer setup here is anything that I draw is going to be on level 1, but it's always going to be forced to white. Could you use set by layer to change only blocks? That is a fabulous question. Watch this, we can do that, Paul. Right, so I'm going to close this drawing here real quick, and let's reopen that drawing and I will show you. Let me get that drawing reopened. Right, and we're talking this one. Right, this drawing was initially created in MicroStation, that's why I know. So how we do this is you can go Q select. For those of you that have never used this command, this is awesome, and I have a webinar specifically on this. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to tell it I want to grab all my block references. And in my case, I'm not going to worry about which property it is. I'm going to come down here and select all, and I'm going to hit OK. And it's created me now a selection set that's just my block references in here. There's 655. Now if I do set by layer, and I will go yes and yes. And now those blocks and only the blocks have been changed to by layer. That's how we do that, Paul. But as you've got to do it in 2 stages. So the first thing you have to do is select just the blocks, and then we do the set by layer, and then it will force all the layer definitions to by block. And again, if we go back to set by layer, and I go check my settings, you'll see here that again, I'm forcing it to change the color, the line type, the line weight, material, and transparency by layer. In some cases, I may not want to do anything other than change the color. So I may want to uncheck all of these except color. So I'm only forcing the color in case there's an override line type in here. And then it will not force the line type of whatever is an override in the blocks to, it won't change that to by layer. It's only going to change the color depending on what's selected here. All right. Any other questions on SetByLayer? This is one of my favorites, just because it makes my life a lot easier. Okay. Now we're going to talk about one of my other favorites, which is purge versus minus purge. So minus purge is the command line version. Purge is the dialog box command. And minus purge is the only way you can get to remove certain things called registered applications. Registered applications in your drawing, as I've talked about in other webinars, are killers and can cause problems in your drawing and some other things. And otherwise, both commands do allow for purging of items. So when we talk about the purge item or the purge command first, we'll take a look at this, and we have two headings. We have a purgeable and a non-purgeable items. Starting in the 2020 version, they've significantly improved the purge dialog box. So this find non-purgeable items actually tells you where those items are, and it gives you some other cool things we can do. And that's really what I want to show you. And you can use checkboxes in the named items not used to provide a way to select purgeable items by category as well as individual items. So where I see the blocks here, I can expand out the plus sign and only purge a single block definition if I want it gone. Or I can select all of the blocks, or I can hit purge all versus purge checked items, and we'll go through this. And then the non-purgeable items has the really neat features that I want to really cover today, is that the non-purgeable items displays additional information specific to why the item cannot be purged. So for example, in this here, I see that I cannot get rid of this 12,000 L_1 block, and I can see that there is one block insertion on layer AAR Fire Doors 2D. Now you'll also see that there is a little blue square with a magnifying glass. If I click on that, it will zoom to that object on that layer, and it will allow me to then erase it, do whatever I want, change the layer, and then that will allow me to now get rid of those items. So it's really kind of cool. It zooms in, shows you the objects that can't be purged and some other information like that. And then the minus purge. So when we use the minus purge, this is the command line only version. And what you'll see in here is all the same things that we saw in our purge dialog box, with the exception of one piece called regapps right here. This is your registered applications. In your registered applications, what those are is in your drawing, if you bring objects in, and in a lot of cases XREFs, and we'll talk about that command in just a minute, how we turn that off. Anytime you bring in a block, an XREF, anytime you're bringing in any data, if there is a registered application that was used during the creation of that, or you opened it up in a program. So let's say you open up and do some work in basic AutoCAD, but you have the Carlson shell. You know, a lot of people use Carlson. When you even just draw a simple circle and save that drawing, the Carlson information from Carlson is actually embedded into the AutoCAD drawing, even though you're not using it. So what we want to do is we want to purge that information out to make sure that we keep our drawings clean. And excessive numbers of registered applications cause significant drawing performance issues and can cause some other issues as well. It can cause some strange crashing issues. It can cause some behavior changes in how things should normally work versus when they're not working properly. So one of the things that I typically do is purge these registered applications regularly. And then registered applications are third-party apps, non-Autodesk software placeholders in your drawing. What year did they start minus purge? Minus purge started back in, I want to say that one comes back all the way back to R10. Okay, so we're talking late 80s is when they did that. That was back when if you were going to run an audit on your drawing, you had to open up the drawing, and the first command you had to do was audit. Otherwise, you could not audit during the middle. Removing these normally when you're purging the registered applications, that list should be 20 or less, but as this list grows, it does impact drawing performance. And this is the one thing I want to talk to you about is if you use a lot of external references or XREFs in your drawings, go in and type in XREF regapp CTL for the external reference registered application control. Leaving this at the default 0, which is the default out of the box, means that if you bring an XREF in, all of the registered applications in your XREF now get embedded into your drawing and copied over. I always set mine to 1 to prevent that from occurring. So in most cases, none come across. On occasion, you'll have 1 or 2. This really helps keep your drawings clean, and this is that bonus item about this XREF regapp control. Always set it to 1. That's the best advice I can give you. It's going to help prevent you from getting a lot of these registered applications. So now we're going to do a demonstration of this. So let's go back to here. Right, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to run the purge. Is this file-based setting? No, the XREF regapp control is a system variable. So once you've changed it, it should stay for all drawings. And do regapps cause actions in your drawing to slow down? Yes. If I am in a drawing, and I have seen this a lot, Joseph, is that if you are in a drawing that has upwards of 70,000 registered applications, and I've seen drawings with 500,000, I can start a line command and it will literally think for 5 to 10 seconds before it will ask you to pick the start point. And then I'll click the start point and then it will wait 5 to 10 seconds for the second point. And it causes that kind of delay because those registered applications, for those of you that don't know, your DWG that gets created is nothing more than actually a very fancy database that AutoCAD is reading. So every time you invoke an action in AutoCAD, like a line, a polyline, a copy command, things like that, it has to go through the database that is your DWG and confirm that nothing has taken precedence or superseded it, which is why it has to go through all of those registered applications and slows down all those processes, is that it has to validate those before it lets you do the command. So when we go to our purge dialog box, you'll see that we have a whole bunch of stuff here that can be purged, right? And we can do this a number of ways. I can click the purge all and I can purge everything out of here. Let's say I only want to pick certain things. So I want to just get rid of these unnamed blocks. Or actually, these aren't unnamed. The $C, anytime you see an $C block, what this is you were in another drawing, you hit Control C for copy, you brought it over here and you did paste as a block. That creates these $C blocks. And I can't tell you how much that drives me crazy, but that's just me. I'm not going to tell you how to do your CAD, but these things annoy me because I don't know what they are. So I can check just those items and I can say purge checked items, and you'll see that it got rid of just those but left everything else. And you'll see I have dimension styles in here. I have a bunch of stuff in here that's not currently in use. I have a bunch of layers. What I typically do, and we've got line types in here. I have materials. I have multi-leader styles, plot styles. So I know that this is an STB, or at one time was a STB or a style-based drawing that may be now color-based or CTB. And so these plot styles do show up as purgeable items. And I've got tables and I've got multiple text styles. So I can wipe it all out very quickly just by hitting Purge All. And now I have no extra garbage in here, right? And I usually have this checked where I'm purging nested items, which means it does multiple passes until everything's clean. I always make sure I purge zero-length geometry, any empty text objects, and any orphan data. This is how I usually run mine. And now we're going to take a look at this non-purgeable. This is the cool thing. So if I go to non-purgeable and I go to blocks and I see this proposed access, and you'll see that I have, this is an aligned dimension. I have one on layer 0. So somewhere in this drawing is this dimension. So I can click this little button right here, and it's going to zoom me right to there. All right, if you select Purge All and then need one of those blocks, for example, later in the drawing, did the Purge delete everything from the drawing so I have to redraw it? Yes, that is exactly what happens, is that we've removed that block definition from the drawing. So if there is a block you think you need later, use those check boxes, right? Instead of doing the Purge All, use your check boxes in order to find what you're looking for. Right? So this is where I came in here. And now if I erase this and I go back to my purge dialog, you're going to see now under purgeable items, both of these blocks now show up. Will it select every instance of the non-purgeable item? No, Leif, it's only, well, let's actually talk about this. So we have one here, one here. Let's go where I can find multiples of something. So let's look at a catch basin, benchmark. Okay, see, I have 6 of these. Let's see what else I can find. There we go. So aligned dimensions. I have 7 aligned dimensions here using this click description that are on layer 0. So if I click this, it is going to zoom out and it is going to give me selection on all of those items that I just picked from that purge. So again, I was down here and I said, I want to see these aligned dimensions because I want to get rid of this. It zoomed out so I could see them and it selected them. So now I could hit erase. Abby, you're talking about point cloud. How can AutoCAD bring a 2D point cloud and change it to 2D? You can't. A 3D point cloud is just that. It is a 3D point cloud. You can't really change it to 2D because you can't bring it directly in here. You're actually attaching that point cloud as an external reference. So what you may need to do in that case is you may need to trace over, or you may need to do something so slightly different so that we get some different results. But that's how we use that purge. Will they be purged if they are on layer 0? Yes. Anything in here, but there are 2 layers you can't really ever purge. Layer 0 you can never get rid of, period. And I did cover that in a previous webinar in my 2021 series where I talked about what's so special about layer 0. And Lori will have a link where you can go back and see those. And we'll put that in the chat here. So layer 0 is basically where AutoCAD starts. You always have layer 0, you can't get rid of it. If layer 0 doesn't exist in your drawing, so let's say you're using a different DWG creator, TurboCAD is one. There's a couple others that allow you to get rid of layer 0. As soon as you open it up in AutoCAD, it puts layer 0 back in. The other one is def points. That's an old holdover. Def points is a non-printable layer. Usually def points does not appear in your drawing until you put a dimension in. As soon as you put a dimension in, that def points layer immediately appears, and there's some caveats on using that. I will find that webinar and I will post that link here. But it's important to know that we can't purge layer 0, but any of the objects on layer 0 that we can select, right? So these are on layer 0, I can select them, I can erase them, etc. So that is purge. Now let's talk about minus purge. Since I have this drawing open, there's a reason for it. So this is where we get to our registered applications right here. So I'm going to do registered applications, and it asks me the name to purge. I'm going to purge everything and verify, and I'm going to say no. What you're going to see in this drawing is that there's 75 registered applications. Now we can talk about these from the beginning. So we've got some DD style stuff in here. What I usually start looking for is things that don't make sense. Like here's an ADCAD ZZ and an ADE projection. Typically that this means from a support standpoint is that MicroStation has touched this drawing at some point or another CAD program. And as we come down here, there's a CAD tools. I see some civil spiral curve draft tables. Usually this means Carlson has been involved, which may be the CDR utility here. I see some old DCA, EGPT. This is Eagle Point, and these are all Eagle Point pieces. Yep, MicroStation right there. So, and then SDI and SDKs. So that means something in this drawing or an XREF that had been brought into this drawing was originally done in MicroStation, Carlson, or Eagle Point, or had those applications used in it, and has now put those things in here, and we want to make sure we strip them out. This is why that minus purge is so important, and purging reg apps regularly. And then again, we talk about the XREF reg app control. You'll see that this one is currently set to 0 because I've not configured my AutoCAD 2023. Normally I will set this to 1. I had to do some resets, so I haven't put everything back in exactly how I usually have it. But this XREF reg app control, setting that to 1, means that if I have an XREF I bring in here, it's not going to bring in any of this other stuff. So that's really what the importance is of Purge, the Purge dialog box, and what it gives you access to and gives you visibility to. Is there a way to just list the reg apps if you're curious? Yes, we can do that. So what we do here is we'll go back to here, minus purge, and we have to do an RE, and we enter the name to purge and verify each name to be purged. You can go yes, or you can say no here, but if there's not an easy way to see what's in there short of just purging them all. So there's no way to go, minus purge or show you what reg apps. So you have to go through this purge information in order to see it. If we set the XREF reg app, hold on, let's back up a little bit. Do you have a list of CSFire settings that you use? I do, and I'll show you that. If we set XREF reg app control to 1 in our AutoCAD doc, is this going to continually purge out or eliminate data from LandFX? No. The only thing that you're doing with the XREF reg app control is that it controls when you bring in an XREF that it does not bring any registered applications from the XREF and put it into your drawing. It's not going to change anything with LandFX. And if you do a minus purge and purge out the reg apps, if LandFX is purged from there, the next time you start anything with LandFX or you add anything with LandFX, it gets put back in. Most likely, if you already have LandFX data in your drawing, it will not be purged, and it should not. And is minus purge similar to audit? No, those are two completely different processes. I'm going to guess your name is Aisher. Minus purge is where you can do the same thing in the purge dialog box and purge the reg apps. Audit is only looking for errors in the database. Okay, and audit is a good place if you suspect you have corruption. However, what I typically recommend is if you suspect you have corruption in your drawing, don't do an audit, do an actual recover, because recover actually gets you more information and corrects more problems than just a standard audit. And have you seen the DWG minus purge? Laura, I haven't seen that one yet. I will check. Is there any reason to ever leave XREF reg app control at 0? Honestly, there's not a good reason to leave it at 0. That's just the default that Autodesk comes with. And do reg apps come in when inserting blocks? Yes, Paul. If you have a block that has registered applications in it that you've not purged and you insert that block, it will dump those registered applications into your drawing, and you can't get rid of them until you've either exploded the block definition or you've done something to prevent that block definition because they're part of the block definition in the DWG database. John, how did I get the text window to appear? That is F2 key. Or you can type in TXTSCR or TEXTSCR to bring up your text screen. Lori, I'm glad that helped you. You have a sample drawing pulled up and you purged 42,000 registered applications. Yes. Is the XREF RegApp control in the LT AutoCAD version? It should be. James, I will come back to the def points. I actually have a complete webinar on layer 0 and def points. I'll see if I can find that quickly and I'll put that in the chat. That may be part of my AutoCAD webinars, but it's a holdover. But if nothing else, James, I will make sure that I have Lori email you the link to that specific webinar and we'll get you the PDF of the slides. Right? Purge One always seems to have a lot of people asking a lot of questions about it because people don't use it well or don't use it often or they don't use it the way it's intended. I'm just a really big fan of this piece right here. This was probably my biggest draw to going to 2020 or newer, is getting this level of clarity on why you can't get rid of something. Because if you've ever seen in 2019 or older, you do have a non-purgeable, you click on it and it just tells you, oh, you can't get rid of this annotative style, but it doesn't tell you anything about it. So it's really hard to figure out what you do need to do to get rid of it. Like I can see here, this dimension style is annotative, and there are 2 on V row anno, and it's inside the block X boundary. So here is where I'd have to go and find my block X boundary here. And now I can go find that boundary. I would have to explode it. Can you use -purge in a template to remove regapps? Absolutely you can, and I highly recommend you do it. You want your template to be the cleanest that you can have your template before you start work. That's going to help prevent you from having issues later. Any other questions? If not, we're going to move on. All right, let's move on. So just here's a quick recap of what I did this year. All of these are mine. I'm the only one that does your AutoCAD webinars here. So we started off the year, I did an AutoCAD efficiency tools and best practices. No, I have never run into a situation where I need to recover a registered application. Never. If AutoCAD does not need it and you purge it out, if there's a need for it, what will end up happening is that as soon as you use whatever program it came from, it'll immediately put it back in and you won't even notice that you've done anything. And how do you work with other templates and save it as a template? Usually I'll open up the template. So I'll open the DWT directly, not start a new drawing with it. And then I will make my modifications and then I'll save as and save it as a template, as a .dwt, Paul. So I talked about AutoCAD efficiency tools and best practices. I talked about standards, templates, tool palettes, drafting tools, keyboards, commands, custom programming. I talked about what's new in AutoCAD 2023. If you guys are not on 2023, that's a great one so you can kind of see what's new in just the AutoCAD portion of it. Another big one I did was all about tool palettes, where I tell you what is a tool palette, what you can put into it, customizing and creating, and how to share them. I did a live with Ryan Wunderlich 2022. This was turning on old style toolbars. This was changing hatch behavior. And this was text and mtext in all caps. And then the last one I did was a tips and tricks 2022 #1, where I talked about how to use non-standard text files. In other words, how to use SHXs correctly, how to do background masking on mtext, and how to create custom hatch patterns. Not only did I walk you through how to create a custom hatch pattern, I actually gave you all the information to create your own. And these are basic hatch patterns. We can do more complex ones, but I outlined exactly how to have this done. Oh, you're having a hatch issue. I have multiple hatches in a drawing and I want to find the cumulative area. A lot of times the property panel just says varies for the area. How do I easily find the area of multiple hatches? Whitney, that's going to be an interesting question. There's a number of reactors that happen with that, okay? So usually you should have an area that says varies, and in your properties panel or in your properties palette, there should be underneath that, there should be a cumulative area if all of the hatches you've selected have an area. If one of those hatches does not have an area associated to it, in other words, you've got a problem with the hatch, it will not give you the cumulative area. And so that's where we need to go back and find that one. And I may or may not have a good example of that. I may find one here and show you. Running minus purge on templates is actually removing, absolutely. Remove anything, Cynthia, that it says to remove. Go ahead and just remove them all. Again, if you're not using radial dims, you've purged it out. If you're using radial dims, the next time you start a radial dimension, it'll immediately put that registered piece back in and you don't need to worry about it. Oh, let's see. Now, the $1 million question, because you asked me, is, let's see if I can, because I may still have, I have a hatch drawing that I have a broken hatch in. Now let's see if I've got it still. Well, let's see if this one is it. Are these webinars saved? Where can I find them? My webinars, if you go and look at the chat box, Lori put in a link to basically all of my webinars. The resources.imagine.com, authors Ryan Wunderlich, that'll give you a link to me. And there's the year in review 2022. So if we're looking at hatches, see, I've got an area and a cumulative area. So if I go Q select and I grab all of my hatches, I'm going to say select all. And I want you to see that I do see a cumulative area here for all that I've picked. Now, if I break one of these hatches, and I can break them, then typically what I find is if you have a broken hatch means you don't have an area associated to the hatch. And where I usually find that is if you have overlapping lines, if you have multiple polyline points on the same vertex, things like that, the hatch will come in here. And if you click on it and you don't see an area, or the area says nothing, you won't be able to do cumulative areas. And that's where you're getting the problem, Whitney, is one or more of your hatches is broken, so you are not getting cumulative. Mark, that is right. Option for broken hatches, regenerate the hatch boundary, line work shrink wrap to create closed boundaries, rehatch and get cumulative. Yes and no, that does work most of the time, but you still may have multiple vertices here. So if I happen to move this hatch out here, and you'll see it's now broken boundary, I can do that process. But if I do not see a vertex pop up on one of these, that means that there's a duplicate vertex here. The other thing is if I draw a polyline and I go polyline from here to here to here to, whoops, let me turn on erase here, right? OS mode 109. Right, so if I draw a polyline from here to here to here to here, and I come back up here, and I come back here, and back here, and back here, and back here, and back here, right? I can do this. If I hatch this, chances are the hatch is going to be broken. If I actually go through and do exactly what you talked about, Mark, and regenerate the hatch boundary, it will actually pick up all of these polyline lines and do that, and it will not necessarily create it. I've had it work, and I've had it not work. What I typically say is if you've got a problem with a hatch like this one, let's say it comes in as broken, and I don't have an area, what I would typically do is I would trace back over this with a closed polyline, move that closed polyline out so that it's all by itself, catch that, and then put it back, and then move the whole thing back. How to export the line style, and all right, Leo, that's a good question. Yeah, line work shrink wrap usually weeds the polyline. I've had it not always be successful depending on how the polyline was built. That's why I put the caveat in there. It does work most of the time. I've had it not work before. How to export a line style and edit the line style in a drawing. Leo, that is going to be a much bigger prospect. I have a Lisp routine that allows me to extract line types out of a drawing, and then that creates a .lin file, and then we have to go back in and modify the .lin. That's a bigger issue that we would have to cover, and that might be a good webinar. My suggestion, Leo, submit that over to Lori, so you might get a $50 gift card out of that. What's a good workflow to take a 3D Revit model of a factory and produce a drawing set of 2D plan views that contains layer according to BIM standards? Wow, that's a good question. So ultimately where I would start with that is, are you getting the 3D model or are you getting the 2D sheets? Because if they've got a 3D model, if they create the 2D plan sheets and export the plan sheets out, that would probably be the best way to go. And then your BIM standards, depending on how things go or what your BIM standards are, you can use Laytrans to translate layers from whatever comes out of Revit into your BIM standards. You could also modify your export out of Revit to utilize your layer standards. And to be clear, using -purge in the Civil 3D template to remove all reg apps is a good thing. Yes, Cynthia, there are 18, or there's between 16 and 18 that always get put back into a Civil 3D drawing every time you open up Civil. As long as that list continuously remains under 20, you're in good shape. -purge when you circle back. I type in -purge reg apps, then what? We use Carlson. When you do reg apps, it's going to say, do you want to purge? It's going to ask you, select them to purge. Just hit enter, because there should be a star within the brackets, an asterisk within the brackets. It's going to then ask you, do you want to confirm each one? I usually say no. All right. And that should be fine, Devin. When setting up a library of standard blocks and details, should I save them as drawings within a sheet set, within a tool palette, or a block library? Brock, that is a good question. Really, it comes down to workflow. How many people need to utilize these? Are you guys all in the same office? Are you guys working remotely? Are you guys all scattered over multiple offices? That's a bigger question that comes down to more how to use this via CAD standards and how you want to do this. Typically, when I create a standard library of blocks and details, I like it on a network drive. If not everyone can access that network drive, so let's say you have remote users over VPN, then what I do is I set up a login script that makes all those standard blocks and details, copies them to the local C drive. Any changes that are made on the network immediately get on the next person user's login. They should be copied back down with a X copy looking for delta changes. You can run that as a batch file, and then you can set that up with a tool palette. You can use the block library. So typically what I would do in that case, if you're going to have them all local, if you invoke the block palette, right, if we invoke the block palette over here, I would go to libraries and I would put your libraries in here so that your people can easily go back and forth. Like, here's my webinar library. It knows that. These are the drawings that are in here. That's how I would probably set that up, but that would be a bigger discussion just based on how your CAD standards currently work and how you would want them to work for your people. You guys have some good questions today. Thank you. All right, so we're going to come back here. That's my recap. So new thing we're doing this year. So we're looking for topics for 2023. Leo, this is what I was telling you about, is that send your topic to lelliott@rand.com. So if your topic is chosen as the best or one of the best for a webinar for 2023, you're going to get, the lucky person is going to get a $50 Amazon gift card. Okay. We want to know what you guys really want to find out about, because I can tell you what I use, and I can tell you all about the things that I like and the tools that I use and think are really cool. That may not be things that you guys really need or want or care about. But if you send this over to Lori, we're going to review them all. We're going to figure out which ones are the best. And you guys, anyone who's selected as the best topic or topics, or multiple people, they're all going to get $50 Amazon gift cards. And when I do the webinar and your topic is chosen, your name is going to be up there as far as this was submitted by so-and-so as one of the users here. And then you guys will be recognized for that. So obviously we've already shifted into the Q&A time. But one of the things I do want to tell you about before we get more into the Q&A is that right now, for just you guys right here, there's a 20% discount for all live online courses. There's a special code. You must enroll in the course by January 31st, and you must complete it by March 31st. Okay, so any of our online courses, 20% off. And with that, I have a second poll for you. And this is an interesting poll. And the poll is, how many of you would attend one of the AutoCAD classes if you knew I was the instructor? So if you knew I was actually teaching one of these classes, one of these live online courses, and you knew I was going to be the instructor, how many of you would definitely sign up for something if you knew I was going to be the instructor for sure? And I'm going to hold this poll open for a little longer just to make sure we get enough responses here. Is the topic suggestion related to AutoCAD only, looking for info on AutoCAD Civil 3D and Revit interaction? Gabriel, that's still a good one to hand over to Lori. I primarily handle AutoCAD webinars, but Lori can forward that to the Civil 3D and or the Revit team so that we could get a webinar that specifically talks about that. So if nothing else, send it to her. It may not come to me, but she can get it to the right person. And Evelyn, yep, it always depends on the content whether or not you would want to do that. I totally understand that. All right, I'm gonna hold the poll open for about another 10, 15 seconds. So if you haven't voted, make sure you do. Otherwise, I'm gonna go ahead and close it here. All right, and we're gonna close the poll. Wow, 66% of you said yes, you would, and 32 are maybes. Thank you. I feel very, very honored that you guys think that highly of me. All right, let's get back to any of your other questions. Now's the time. Thank you, Carolyn. I appreciate that comment. Paul, you're embarrassing me, but thank you.
And do we have any more slides, Ryan? Is that
I've got two more things here, and I do have a question earlier on the CSFire list. Yes.
Okay.
Sorry about that, LA. Let me go back to here. Let me get my CAD open here because I do, or not my CAD, I do have. Now, this is what I set up, and it'll take me just a second here. Come on, where is it? There is mine. All right, here's my CSFire list. So my CSFire, the first thing I did is I set QA flags to 0. Typically speaking, you should never be messing around with QA flags. That's specifically for the programmer side, but I have seen issues where somebody fat fingers something and changes this. This will change behavior of how Lisp routines and other custom programming works. Save fidelity is 0. My file DIA, my attribute DIA, my command DIA always get set to 1 every time I start AutoCAD. And I have this buried in another file that launches every time I launch AutoCAD. And I immediately set my OS mode to 109. This is my preferred object snaps or my O snaps. I set command expert to 5. Expert is not held, so you have to set that every time. What that does is it suppresses a lot of the stupid muttering that we get from AutoCAD about file already exists. Are you sure you want to do that? Hey, this object isn't a polyline. Do you want to convert it to one? I do a lot of those things. I turn my UCS icon to no origin because I do not like my UCS icon. Well, let's open up AutoCAD and we'll talk about these. So I do not like my UCS icon here set at 0, 0. I like mine to always be set to no origin, which is setting it here. So it always stays in the lower corner. And if I have a little square, I know it's on 0, 0. Where do you find the OS mode numbers listed? Okay, so when we talk about, right, we're going to talk about OS mode. It's a system variable. So these things are saved as bit codes. So what you're doing is that with my 109 is a combination of 64 for insertion, plus 32 for intersection, plus 8 for node, plus 4 for center, plus 1 for endpoint. So what you do is you set this up the way you want, type in OS mode, and then make note of that number. So that's that one. And let's see, let's go back and talk more about these, and I will try. I like to turn my grid off, so I automatically set that. HP separate, so my boundary and my hatch and my boundary are separated, but they're still associated. So if I happen to delete the polyline that is the hatch, or I happen to click on the hatch and delete it, I'm not deleting the boundary. HP quick preview off, I turn that off, so when I'm hovering over an area, I have to click on it. Otherwise, it will try and flash up a preview of what the hatch pattern looks like. That's a huge resource hog. HP name solid, so I'm presetting my hatch pattern name to solid. I'm changing polyline width to 0 because I do run into things where polyline width has been changed to some value other than 0. I set my CE color, my CELT scale, CE line type, and CE line weight all to essentially by layer. And what these are here is that if I go into here and I change anything here with no selection, everything that I draw from that point is going to be affected by that. So if I change my line type here to something other than line by layer or continuous or by layer, every layer that I'm on, it's always going to be drawing that. So I always reset those. And then the last thing I do is that I reset myself so that every time I open up a drawing, I start on layer 0. I know this layer exists. It's always going to be in there. This is what I have set up. Let's see, is there a webinar about making an XREF file? I do have an all about XREFs. So we'll talk about, I do have that is another one. I'll make a note of that, and we'll make sure we send you the link to that webinar. Do you use WBlock for clean drawings often as compared to Purge? That depends on the level of the problem. I may just WBlock certain things out, but what I do have, what you do is that if you are using WBlock, anything that's ambient in your environment, in other words, whatever your current layer is, whatever your current line type is set to, whatever your text style, dimension style, multi-leader style, table styles are set to, all get embedded into that. So what I typically like to do is that I like to start with a clean template that has nothing in it. And then in that clean template, I will copy the geometry over and use that as, and then WBlock from there, and make sure that I've done my purge and all of that to make sure that I'm not doing things. Do multiple hatches slow down drawings? Not necessarily, Brock. Multiple hatches typically don't, unless we're talking about a significant number. And if you're using like the dot or anything that's got very small pieces in it in the hatch, depending on your computer performance, it can cause some computer performance issues. What's the most efficient way to set up company-wide standard Civil 3D settings on new CPUs? We currently have one person doing this. Mike, that's a bigger question. We have a couple of things we could do to help set that up much quicker. And that would be for a bigger discussion. I know that I have a way to do that. And it's actually fairly painless when I do that, is that I have one machine that is what I consider to be my golden image. And then you have to create a shortcut to export those settings. You install Civil 3D on the new machine, you run it once, you close it, you import that saved settings, that zip file, and then boom, it's exactly the same as your golden image. XREF RegApp control does not seem to be an AutoCAD light command. Is there another way to access this? I'll have to double check that, Jeffrey. I thought it should have been in AutoCAD LT, but I will double check that. Let's see. Karen, I'm not sure about the deviation tolerances to your dimension. That I'd have to dig in a little deeper with you in order to find it. Layer management, and do you set your CSFire in your QNew template? I do not. I actually run an ACAD doc.lsp so that every time I open up a drawing, it goes through and runs those those CSFires. And we can talk more about the list piece. There is something, let's see, there's one more thing I wanted to show you guys, in lieu of the fact that it is the holidays. Happy holidays.
I wish everybody a Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, and all the best to the year that is to come. Enjoy your family, enjoy your friends, and be safe. And as always, Ryan, we can't thank you enough for your time that you take for all of us. Thank you so much. Love the shirt, and Merry Christmas to you and your family. Thanks,
Merry
everyone.
Christmas to all of you and happy holidays, and we will see you guys in February.